大家好! Welcome to the very first episode of Surviving China. Today, we're going to learn how to count from 0 to 9,999 with just 14 words. Let's get started. Fundamental Chinese, boom! First of all, let's learn how to count from 1 to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Believe it or not, you guys can already count to 99 with just these words. Why? Because unlike in English, where we have separate words for 11, 12, 20, 30, 40, and so on, the Chinese language actually uses math to represent its numbers. I know, math again, but you've got to admit, it's quite genius. So instead of 11, we have 11. Instead of 12, we have 12. And this continues on till 19. When it reaches 20, it becomes 20. Then it continues with 21, 22, 23, and so on. What you may have noticed by now is that it actually follows a certain mathematical formula. Now, I'm not claiming to be a mathematician or anything, but I've decided to make up my own formula anyway to make this as easy to understand as possible. So to count up to 99, we're going to use the formula y times 10 plus z, where y and z are any number between 0 and 9. If we take 23, for example, we can break it down to 20 plus 3, and break it down further to 2 times 10 plus 3. When you're reading it out in Chinese, you're basically just saying 2, 10, 3, with the mathematical symbols implied. In Chinese, this will be 23. This continues on until 99, which is simply 99. Okay, now that we've got the basics done, let's move on to part 2. 2 additional words we need to know are bai and qian. So the formula for counting up to 999 is x times 100 plus y times 10 plus z. And following the same logic, if we wanted to count up to 9,999, we're going to use the formula w times 1,000 plus x times 100 plus y times 10 plus z. And 9,999 simply becomes 9,999. No wonder Chinese kids are so good at math. They've been doing it since they were a baby. So if math is really not your thing and you're like, yo, cat, math, no. We can take a look at this from another perspective because we actually use the same logic in English when we say numbers such as 3,700. When we're saying 3,700, we're basically implying that 3 times 1,000 plus 7 times 100 is 3,700. The only difference is that in Chinese, this also applies to numbers located in the tens. So if we take numbers such as 3,728, for example, it simply becomes 3,728, which directly translates to 3,700 to 10,8. Now this is where it gets a little complicated. But remember, if you're feeling overwhelmed at any point during this video, feel free to pause it. It's a video. Have a break. Have a Kit Kat. Unless, of course, if you're on a diet, in which case, cucumber. Moving on. If there are no zeros in the number, or if the zeros are located at the end of the number, then you would use the same pattern as before. For example, if you want to express numbers such as 1,111, it's simply 1,111. And if you want to express numbers such as 1,000 or 1,100 or 1,110, where the zeros are located at the end of the number, you'll simply read it out as 1,000, 1,100, and 1,110, respectively. However, if the zero appears in the middle of the number, then you have to express that zero in between. So 1,011 becomes 1,011, while 1001 becomes 1001. Another quick note is that Chinese people sometimes like to shorten their words. And what I mean by this is that numbers such as 1100 and 1110 can actually be expressed in more than one way. 1100, for example, can be expressed as 1100, as we've seen before, or as simply as 1100, and 1110 can be expressed as 1110, or simply as 1101. This is why communicating that zero in the middle is so important. Without that zero, we won't be able to differentiate between 1100, 1010, and 1001. At this point, you should be able to effectively communicate any number between 0 and 9999. Yay! But in order to sound more like a native speaker, we have to learn one more word, liang. A quick example of how to use this is in expressing 2222, which becomes 2222. As you can see, liang is simply another way of saying the number 2, and is used before bai and qian, and is also used before different measure words, which we'll get into in the next video. So here's a recap of all the things we learned today. To communicate numbers in Chinese, you have to 1. Break it up into groups of ones, tens, hundreds, and thousands. And 2. Break it down further so it's clear to see which single-digit number are multiplied with the tens, hundreds, and thousands. Now, simply 3. Read the resulting numbers out individually. The mathematical symbols in between are implied as you read it out. When the numbers do not include any zeros, or if the zeros are located at the end of the number, you would read it out as is. If there's a zero in the middle of the number, it must be expressed with a ling. The number 2 can be expressed in 2 different ways, liang and When placed before hundreds, thousands, and so on, or before measure words, we use the term liang. Otherwise, we use the term So that's it! Again, you really don't have to memorize the formulas for any of this. As long as you understand the concept behind the formulas, you should be able to count up to 9,999 without any problems, which is more than enough to take care of about 98.72% of your daily transactions. Unless, of course, if you're the type to spend more than 9,999 renminbi on your meals, in which case you should definitely check out other sources on YouTube. Or, just hire your own personal translator. So it's been a joy learning how to count with you guys, and on the next episode of Surviving China, we're going to learn how to actually use these numbers in our daily conversations. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, share, and comment on what other topics you think are important for surviving in China. In the meantime, 学习快乐，拜拜。